Fair warning. I highly suspect this is going to be one of my more triggering episodes, though I'm going to do my best to keep it free of the more caustic aspects of gender politics, and I ask that people do the same in the comments section. I just have some, as far as I can tell, novel thoughts on this specific point I thought people might find interesting. I'm going to say up front that I don't now, nor have I ever considered myself a part of the online red pill sphere, nor any of their like-minded affiliates. And even if I did, like so many others, that term has become so watered down as to be conceptually inert. But be that as it may, I've noticed the words alpha, beta, sigma, etc. being hurled across culture war spaces increasingly regularly these last couple years, and as this isn't entirely new ground for me, I figured I may as well toss my 2 cents into the mix. To start us off, the terms alpha and beta, in regards to their reference to sociological ranks, originally described the hierarchy of wolves, which, yes I know, does not occur in the wild. But recall that a wild wolf pack is just an extended family, with the so-called alpha being the father and the betas being multiple generations of his pups. But in captivity, which is where the faulty label came from, when a group of unrelated wolves, particularly males, are thrown into an enclosure together, the strongest, most dominant male becomes the alpha or leader, and thus is the de facto patriarch, which I would argue is no different to how human tribes operated. And this similarity is probably what ultimately led to us not merely domesticating them, but fully integrating them into our lives and societies as effectively members of our own packs. But I digress. Just as in nature in our hunter-gatherer tribes, which were also just corporate families, the alphas, the patriarchs, would be the men who were dependent on no one and nothing to survive and prosper, whereas the betas, though they may be equally competent, wise, and physically attractive, were dependent on their fathers, their alphas, for their own success and authority. Fast forward to civilization, this translates to an alpha being the dangerous loner who stands apart from society, fearing neither its rejection nor reprisal, for he knows he can fend for himself. He knows he can fight the world alone, because he's done so before, and hence he can afford to be irreverent and brash, whereas the beta depends upon the external system created by the alphas for his authority, be it a religion, a law, a business, or whatever, and so he bends to its whims, he follows its rules. The beta capitulates, the alpha dissociates. The analogy I like to use is this. Imagine 2 ship captains, both equally competent and experienced as far as the actual running and sailing sides of ship management are concerned, and both their ships are equivalent seaworthy. But the one captain built his ship with his own 2 hands, while the other commissioned it from a professional seawright. Now ask yourself, whose would you rather sail on? If you're just going out for a little pleasure cruise in and around the harbor, it doesn't really matter, does it? As you won't be on board long enough to see any perilous storms. But if you're on a transatlantic voyage, then you'd want to know that both ship and captain are fully acquainted with both the everyday rigors, as well as every possible peril of seafaring. If the one guy built his own ship from scratch, you can derive a pretty thorough assessment of its quality through an evaluation of his own. Whereas if he'd contracted somebody else to do it, you'd have to become an expert on sailing yourself in order to verify, which would defeat at least half the point of chartering someone else's ship in the first place. Plus, if he built a ship from timbers himself once, then in theory he can do it again, making him the far less likely to end up marooned and stranded. For those who may have lost track of the metaphor, an alpha male is one whose power, authority, and purpose are all internally derived, and so his quality as a potential mate or ally, as well as his potency as a rival, can be directly implied from his circumstances, as they are entirely of his own make and or choice. By contrast, a beta depends on others, usually the alphas, for his authority, and so the causality linkage between his material success and his intrinsic quality is a step removed, making him a less safe, less stable, less secure long-term gamble, both for women looking to form families and for other men looking to form alliances. Since the beta's achievements aren't intrinsic, he can't be as thoroughly relied upon to reproduce them, and since his power is a delegated boon granted by others, be it society at large or a specific other person, it can't be as thoroughly counted on to remain so. In short, people, particularly women, as they are rendered especially vulnerable by being the ones to incubate our young, don't want to be dependent on a dependent, either for procreation or for business, and hence why betas are instinctively categorized as losers, and are usually seen as complementary at best or a liability at worst. Now, for the occasional Zoomers who I know pop in to watch my content every now and again, let me very quickly divest you of one last little misconception. There is no such thing as a Sigma male. That title merely refers to a pro-social alpha, meaning an independent man possessed of a pro-social as compared to an antisocial or dark triad personality type and attitude. Here's a quick differential diagram I've sketched out for you to illustrate. A pro-social alpha is a male who is the captain of his own ship, whose intrinsic quality can be directly deduced from the quality of his works, who doesn't tyrannize over his ship's crew or passengers, both of whom you could class as omegas, who's strong enough to take on the antisocial alphas, which is where we get the archetypal good versus evil king story type from, and is demonstrably capable of repairing or replacing a lost or damaged ship on his own should worse come to worst. So, in summary, an alpha male is not the most overtly dominant or confident, nor even necessarily the most competent person in the room, just the most independently successful in a material and/or reproductive sense, whereas a beta is dependent on external forces, factors, circumstances, or entities for his power, which just means the ability to do, and so is deemed a less dependable ally by other men and a less attractive mating partner by women. But as always, that's all just my take on it. Let me know yours in the comments section, and while you're there, consider leaving a like, subscribe, check out my books, and maybe consider leaving a super thanks or becoming a channel member. And as always, until next time, stay safe, stay sane, and remember to keep your mind clear, not empty. Peace.